Zac Posen, welcome to this episode of Beyond Style Matters. I can't tell you how happy I am to see you.
So nice to see you.
What
So
a
far and so close.
yeah, really. But what a bright light you are in the midst of all this darkness. And I didn't think it would be this dark coming into 2021. But things still aren't okay.
No, things are in a very odd place, but we have to remain optimistic and we have to remain safe and careful and stay creative.
Aha. And that is the real challenge, I think, for so many of us who have work that we so love to do, that's just so part of our DNA almost. But how do you keep it going at a time when so much has just been turned off?
It's a really interesting time. Obviously, I've had an interesting year and a half, kind of, because I'm not responsible for having my whole company with me. So I've transitioned into really a different creative process within fashion and also beyond fashion. And, my creative outlets are, I am working on one of a kind pieces for private clients, for wedding gowns, and then personal projects. So, I have a room next door to me full of mannequins and full of, different ideas and pieces, experimentations, wonderful mistakes, and as well as kind of different, wedding gown projects. And I work in a process where it's kind of, it's definitely a new process where, I drape it. I will then sketch after draping. Sometimes I'll work on a computer from a photo of the draping. And then I work with different amazing talent at different steps along the way, from the pattern makers that I've collected over many years to new pattern makers that I've met in this process, and then different hands and sewers.
When I think of your clothes, I mean, your clothes, your dresses were the kinds of garments and are the kinds of garments that just light up a room. Always so joyful, such an air of real glory in them. I even remember going back to when you first started, those twirly dresses that you were doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll never forget your first show at that. Where was it? In an abandoned synagogue or an old church?
At the Angel Orensan Center. Actually, where like Sarah Jessica Parker had gotten married, but it was very gothic on the Lower East Side. That was a magical show.
And Karen Elson there twirling around in their little dress, and all the great it girls of the era. And there you were, like the mad professor, fixing, crimping, and Anna Wintour sitting in the front row with her kids. She brought her kids to the show, and Julian Schnabel then, of course, because her daughter was his daughter was your best friend, and she was
and styled the show.
Like wow. So anyway, getting back to your dresses.
And the clothing was actually, I think, there's a really interesting transition that I feel you watched, because I wasn't at that stage, even though there was so much glamour in the clothing, I wasn't a gown guy. The gown guy, even though there were always kind of started to be gowns earlier in my career, the gown thing happened over really the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it just was using a different skill set of mine.
Yeah. But the fact is that you always were about elevating the spirit and really putting women on a kind of pedestal where they could just feel their most beautiful.
Well, isn't that the point of great fashion?
Well,
it's not always.
Darling, I've met a few, I don't know what dare I call them, misogynistic designers in my day, where the girls, it wasn't always about making the girls look that pretty, but when I think of the context that you must always imagine your clothes, the red carpets, the parties, the wonderful social gatherings where your dresses would, really illuminate things. How do you project, wear these clothes that you're busily working on even now? When you're designing a wedding gown, like what are weddings looking like these days? I mean, they're certainly not
Well, they're definitely weddings for the future. Let's put
weddings
it
of the
that way,
future.
right? So it's people who have long-term planning for the
Okay,
future. And it's nice because it kind of extends the process,
that's cool. So it's like
which
you're
like it
designing.
can be really perfected. It doesn't have this like studio timeline where it has to fit in between collections. It gives me reflection time where I have the ability really to really sit. I had gotten to a time where there was such a pace where the pace was so fast that I would go in on weekends because that was my solo creative time when I actually got creative time, and I'd work and literally like 9 a.m. on a Monday morning I had to pass that piece off. Like I couldn't get the tape lines fast enough on there, and I developed such a strong dialogue with and collaboration with my atelier and studio and my design team. But now I'm able to step back. I'm able to really nurture the pieces. But when I think about occasions today or dresses and stuff, it's really about the person, and it's really about their fantasy. It's not about necessarily what it does in terms of um, relationship to other gowns in context. It's really more of a solo experience, I would say. And I'm also working on research and building costume projects, and that's totally different. That's storytelling.
Mhm.
You asked about other creative things. I'm working on costumes. I'm working on development of film projects and TV projects. Continuing to work in cooking, which I wrote a cookbook, Cooking with Zac, and that continues to exist. And those are all kinds of different creative
Mhm.
ventures.
Yeah.
And projects. And the other day I was with my parents very carefully, and I used the word hobbies, and they were so offended by the word hobbies. um
I hate the word hobbies
they
personally.
hated it too, and these are not hobbies, and I said, okay, they're not hobbies. um but I'm using other parts of my brain that things that I wasn't ever able to really have the full time or distance, because I think creative development does take time. And I think fashion as a whole had become so fast that there wasn't reflection time, at least in my experience. I was overseeing like between 14 and 16 different collections. And it was just, you don't have time to step back for a day and say, actually, no, it would work better, because by the time you made those decisions, which is important in a business, you have to make quick decisions and own them. It was out of your hands and out. And so, I think this is a really interesting moment for the industry globally to reset, refocus, redefine for the future. I think that in Europe, it seems that there's a little bit, interestingly, the show must go on. And I find that very interesting, and I'm going to be interested to see how that translates into the work. American fashion has been hit really hard, and I think it will come back in a very new and exciting way. I don't know what that will be. I think there'll be new talents that have evolved. I think there'll be people who reassess their existence within the industry, what they make, how they source it, sustainability, how you sell to a customer, and what you want to make creatively, because there is the side globally as fashion is an art form,
Mm.
and maybe it's ready for that next transition. I always think of hold on, I always think of different historical times of hardship in fashion, right? And I look at kind of just post World War II and what happened with the Paris houses,
Mhm.
which ones survived, the introduction and boom of licensing and of fragrance, and that the GIs would have to go when they were going to go back to America to bring that perfume back. They'd go to Schiaparelli and bring back that perfume to their loved ones or their mom or their girlfriend or wife. I don't know. I think fashion, we live in a digital world. I think fashion has touched into digital, into virtual, but I think it's part of the future.
And isn't it so serendipitous that we're having this conversation just after Pierre Cardin has passed away, truly the end of an era, truly a man who revolutionized the notion of modern fashion by licensing his name,
So many ways. Everything.
And his whole space age, futuristic kind of take on things. Yeah, I think that's a bit of serendipity there. But I just want to get back to one thing that you're saying, how, and I obviously totally agree with you. It is, the industry has changed, is changing, and will continue to change so dramatically. And this pandemic has just, sort of put everything into fast forward in a way. But what is changing well beyond the way that we are creating fashion, producing fashion, consuming fashion, is our own personal feelings about fashion and our whole, what does it really mean in our lives? What do we still need it for? And we're all hopefully evolving and going to come out of this craziness as bigger, better people. But what role is fashion going to play in our lives at all?
So, it's a really interesting question. When I first really started to get deeply into fashion, I was probably 15 or 16. And as you know, my father's an artist. And I think there was a really interesting thing happening, in the mid 90s in fashion, where fashion was kind of becoming re-elevated again to expressive art forms and performance of how people presented and the work they were making. And, in about 96, I started interning at the Met. And this idea of under Richard Martin and the library, it was an amazing experience that I was even allowed into this. But, his real thing was fashion as an art form. Mm-hmm. And I really had never, it wasn't an art form for me. And it took me time. I understood the artistry of fashion, but there was a decorative quality to it, and there was a utilitarian quality to it. And the utilitarian purpose, the purpose of clothing and fashion, is what really distinguished it from fine art. And so I think as we reassess today, I think there will always be, I always think there will be trends. I think that trends create a kind of excitement for commerce. I think that we're looking at more home trends and comfort at this moment, for sure. I mean, we're all at home. I'm wearing a turtleneck and I'm wearing sweatpants. I mean, and I'm not in a tuxedo and I'm not in a suit. I think that there'll be two things that I look at. I think there'll be a great desire actually to get dressed again coming out of this. I think young people will feel celebratory. Now, I don't know if that means like no clothing, because, you think of what happens after, in the roaring 20s after a great hardship and the celebration. I always like to remind young people when I speak to them that it wasn't great for everybody in the 20s. Let's see, like there was not good stuff that was going on, and there was a lot of poverty as well. But I think, you have this idea of some form of kind of freedom, and I don't know what that will look like in the future, but I think that there'll be definitely, I think sexuality and how that's expressed will be really interesting. Self-identity, because we are living in a time where there's so much about this and what that means for younger generations. And as fashion will always look to the young movements of, fashion likes youth. They love youth, and they look to that often because we've created a society which, for better or for worse, feels that young, drives influence. And I don't believe that at all, personally.
But it's easier to excite the young people too, because we've seen it all, not all, but a lot of us have been sitting around, and especially the last few years in fashion, I think a lot of, the editors were all sitting there, in the front row, like, ho hum, we've seen it all before, like, give us something new.
Right.
People were desperate for a kind of newness, that there was just all this homogeny and everything
well, I
that
think
we
like,
did.
yeah,
Trends,
when
all
Dema, when Dema got to Balenciaga,
Mhm.
even though, I think that not even though, I think his process was really kind of brilliant because we are living in an age on social media, on computers, where there is such a, what I call a decoupage of imagery and references in the street. And he was able to like twist that and torque that in a fresh way. And that's why it was so brilliant and powerful, kind of exciting to, I mean, I would be thrilled. I was thrilled when I would see kind of how his fresh perspective on this. But we were living in a time when it was like been there, seen there, done that. And sometimes very unemotional, like the emotion had, because there was too much of it. There was no time to build, and there had been so many new brands that had entered the world. And so I think there's going to be really exciting, fresh perspectives. I'm excited to see that and to see how fashion evolves, how fashion uses tech and new technology, because that's going to be a huge part of it. I also think that we're looking at a moment when people could also exist virtually. So fashion might be about, the clothing that we would be talking to right now virtually on us, and what we look like as self-created virtual creatures communicating. And hopefully the human interaction will happen again. But I hope less wasteful is what I would say. I think that ideas of brands really rethinking of what is out there already and how things get upcycled and evolved can really define the new way of what fashion is.
Yeah.
Because I think the old system of just collections production, to me, not as a young person, yes, anymore. I mean, I'm 40, feel a little tired and old to me, and not exciting if I put my young hat on. But, status is always in culture, right? And fashion has fed itself into status. And it'll just be interesting to see how the value systems evolve coming out of this.
Yeah. Okay, shifting to this, because you just brought it up yourself, the question of turning 40. What was that like for you? I mean, in a funny time to celebrate a big birthday during the past. A lot of people, just about everyone, is going to be celebrating some kind of birthday during the pandemic. But
I didn't think I was gonna. This is not how I ever thought. I'm not where I ever thought I would be at this age in my life, or in the rhythm that I worked in, or with my company. And I think that's life. And kind of that realization of that's what makes life exciting, because these twists and turns and changes happen, and they can happen for good reason. So I was in California, and I had two friends, who said, like, we need to put together, like an outside 10-person dinner. And one of my friends is a very successful designer, and the other friend is a successful writer and actress. And they put it on, a small teeny dinner outside, and they could not have been sweeter and kinder. I always knew that I was going to have my 40th in Los Angeles. It wasn't the 40th. I mean, I had stopped celebrating my birthdays. I'd stopped doing parties many years ago. I used to have very big kind of New York City, filled, large dinners or large events around my birthday in my 20s. And then my 30s, I kind of stopped that. But for my 40th, I actually always thought that I was going to have, this is very funny, my Beverly Hills blowout bar mitzvah. That was like some funny fantasy I had. Like, if I'm going to do like a blowout.
Funny.
So we'll put that on hold. And I just always thought, I was going to do, like, a late 30s themed glamour, Hollywood glam. Anyhow, that didn't happen. I was around really close loved ones in Los Angeles. It was really nice. Turning 40, you know, I feel that I am in an incredibly strong, focused, clear place. And I think that this time period that I had from when my company closed, when the trademarks got sold to another company, and I'm involved in that to some degree, um, is really kind of a next stage. And it's able for me to relook at where I was, who I am, what I'm about, kind of a real refocus as I look forward and towards going towards the future. Do I want to work for another fashion brand? Maybe. I think it would be really interesting and exciting. And, I look at that and other mediums too that I might want to work in. So I think it's exciting. I feel healthier than I've ever been in my life, and that's a really good thing to feel. And new stage. That's kind of new chapter, new stage. I never like hold it. I felt better about turning 40 than I did about turning 30.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
I don't know.
you're more comfortable in your own skin probably at 42 than you were at 30. I mean, 30 is still kind of becoming, 40
Yeah.
is like,
And I transitioned from, this identity as a young designer, and it almost when I turned 30, it and just how the industry was interacting with me, it did not feel good, is what I would say. It was a really tough time in my life, as in business and everything. And I was being challenged and I had to go through that. And, it continued that challenge, but it was the beginning of a new chapter and learning experience. And it was kind of the beginning of entering into this other kind of clothing I was making and presenting that was using my skill set in a different way. And I don't regret anything, but 40 was great.
yeah, yeah. I relate to what you're saying, and I know what you mean. But boy, oh boy, you had and have had and are still having quite the ride of the century. I mean, Zac.
Yeah.
I mean, I flash back. I was there at your Paris show, the first Paris show.
Yeah.
Yamamoto came to, like, like, wow, how does that happen? How does it? You were and such a
Well,
big,
Yoshi had told me to go to Paris.
and he was the one that encouraged you.
I mean, it was him and Didier Grumbach that, Didier said, we're going to find you a time slot. And, that was a really interesting moment too. I remember how that came to be was that New York changed their schedule. And I knew I couldn't, at the time I felt, and I probably was wrong about, I felt insecure that I couldn't hold the tail end of New York Fashion Week from a business perspective purely. I wasn't an advertiser. The international editors, such as many, had to go, and there wasn't really room for me in a time slot that really suited me or my brand. And I remember we got given like 9 a.m. Monday morning, and it was really hard, and we kept that up for a year.
Yeah.
And there wasn't room to find another time. And then Paris, offered a time slot. And Yoji knew that I had to go to Paris, knew that I would kind of get killed by the American press.
Mm-hmm.
And he knew that I needed this experience to kind of reassess and come back to America. And we did Paris for 2 seasons. And, it was challenging. I actually loved that first Paris show. Retrospectively, it was grueling. There was a lot of transition professionally after that show and right before that show. We had no business putting on a fashion show to begin with the timing, with the resources, but we did it. And there's elements and pieces in that show that I really adore. I love the soundtrack that the Misshapes do. There's amazing techniques that I don't even know how we developed and made. And yeah.
And your parents always there. I mean, that was one of the favorite things that I look forward to
Yeah.
during New York Fashion Week. Very often for me, and it wasn't because I was that much older than, I don't know what it was, but I guess because personally I knew what a role my parents played in my life and my career and my success. And I would see, like Isaac Mizrahi's mother, was always there. I was happy to talk to her. Or, like even Calvin Klein's mother, came to some of those shows. And there were your parents, like the
Yeah.
sweetest people. And it's totally nuts.
Well, I feel like I took my family on this crazy ride too, which,
But
obviously in House of Z, it's very documented
yeah.
of this ride,
I mean, could you have done it without that kind of incredible, solid support? I mean, it's all speculation. Who knows?
I don't think I would be who I am without my family. So no is the answer. I don't know. I can't think of it any other way. I worked with my mom and sister for many years. But at the same time, I don't think artistically I would be who I am if it wasn't for my father and his support and challenge. He was always my toughest critic with my collections, backstage first, and my greatest champion too. So definitely not is the answer. Quite amazing. And they protected me in many ways.
Mm-hmm. But family can keep you grounded in an extraordinary way, as sometimes friends can. I mean, sometimes I remember talking to McQueen. I loved his mother, was
Yeah.
and so supportive of him. But I remember like Lee McQueen, a dinner I had with him in San Francisco one night where he talked to me about, relationships and how on one hand, he felt there were so many people depending on him. And this is what put such an incredible amount of pressure on him. But how he was going out with someone at the time, he could really trust what what was the objective? Did this guy really care about him, or was it just what he could do for him and all? So that I could see that it's such a crazy making thing too. You get to a position of success and kind of really power, and people are glomming onto you for different reasons.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think I'm a pretty good barometer. I have wonderful friends, that I've had forever. I love making new friends. I'm always pretty cautious, and I'm pretty discerning.
You spending time at the family farm too, which I totally I'm nuts about, because we have a family farm, and I know what joy that's brought me, and how that's become a real a place in my heart, even more than some place that I might even get to physically as much as I'd like to. But you just know that there's that place of solace that has nothing to do with that crazy fashion.
Yeah, no, it was my sanctity. My parents' farm and getting there is my sanctity. And it's really a nest that is protective. And, I call it's like an Arcadia. I also am a nature fiend. I love getting my hands in earth and gardening, and I am so continuously inspired by Mother Nature, by botany and plants, and how this works. And, it's so wild and beautiful, and sometimes ugly, and challenges ideas of beauty, and takes nurturement, or not too, or over nurturement is too much. It's like the ultimate beautiful science experiment. And harmony and music, and they're in Pennsylvania, and it's really it's farmland. It's not the Hamptons, which I also love. It's really its own universe there. And we grow our own vegetables there during the summer and can them, and I love that. I'm very happy there and content. I often fantasize in my head, like, would I be okay to live outside New York City, to live in the country? Because I certainly could drape out of the city in the country and be very happy too. But I mean, I think it's a good balance.
You certainly are a Renaissance man. I mean, there's no question that everything that you do, I mean, besides the fact that I do, believe with every fiber of my being that you are one of the few designers that I've met in fashion who is a true artist. And I've met
Yeah.
a lot of them. I've met all of them. You know, some,
Yeah.
you know, most aren't, but some are. And I know that's the way you see the world, through that
Yeah.
lens. So it does make you that. But you also wear a multitude of disparate hats with great aplomb. A great marketer, always understanding how important it was to be out front, to be there, to be
Yeah.
the person that could tell your own story, you know. And then again, I think of that great loft that your parents lived in, you know, in the West Village. When I came to interview you, you had just come home from Central St. Martin's, you know, they're draping on some girl in the living room.
Yeah.
It was like, you know, you really, you understood that you had to be good on camera, you know, how to talk to a camera and all that stuff. And then, of course, as a business person, not that you were like running your own business,
No, but I was very involved.
you and you aligned yourself with the right people and people that could, you know, and you had an incredible business mind.
Yeah, you have to fashion and running this is a business.
Mm.
It's a business. It is a business. So that understanding and quite frankly, you know, being a fine artist in a way and running that is a business now. But fashion doesn't have, you have to make a lot of something to make the machine work in a sense. You have to create the energy. And I think in some ways I wish I could have been more self-protective as a creator. And as I look forward, I hope I have more of a balance of that. But the responsibility of running your own business, owning part of your own business is huge, and you learn it. And, I felt that through this experience, I'm able to apply my business know-how and knowledge almost into any field. And I loved it. That was the other thing that was surprising is I loved it. I loved learning about it. It was like playing like the ultimate, mind game. Not that building a business to be taken lightly like a game, but I like a challenge and I wanted to learn it, and I learned it through necessity. And it wasn't always pleasant, comes through hardships, but wow, do I feel better off today because of that experience and understanding the know-how of that. And then as in terms of being a front man, I don't, there was always something I definitely understood. I think, at different times, what motivated that was always, it was always about supporting the creativity. I think at times people felt probably it got confused into ego. And I understand that, but really it was always about supporting the machine. And I think that then having the role and responsibility of transcending fashion into kind of being a celebrity, because I had this whole generation grow up with me, that I took with great responsibility. Do I cringe when I Google search? Of course. Sometimes I watch interviews. I'll go on let's watch all the late night shows that I've done, over the past few years. And I think, wow, I was just going so much, that I was tired, or how could I not have been so quick on my feet and answered? But, this experience has led me to meet incredible people, to meet people of all different demographics, to see the world. I mean, that is what is so amazing about fashion is I've been able to interact with every culture. I used to choose where I would want to go through if did it have great food and great museums. And I've been able to interact with people of different religious groups in amazing ways that I don't know what other profession gets to do that, from royalty to people who are making, to picking the silkworm. I mean, there's such a large gamut of people. And, I also feel that it's always important to represent my industry, and being an American designer was a really big responsibility to me in traveling the world and traveling throughout mainland China and South America to Canada, everywhere, and bringing the A game and the best, and representing my company and my country and, and myself to the best possible, way we could. Whoa.
It's been an extraordinary ride, no question, and continues to be. But do you ever feel that maybe there was a price to pay for being so out there, for working so freaking hard?
It was hard on my body.
It was hard on my body.
Physically.
Really?
Yeah, flying every other week, just does. So, but I think that I wish sometimes, there had been more of a balance. I wish I had a driver's license as I sit here at 40 years old. I didn't, because I started so young. And then there's little things, but I don't live with regret is really the answer. I really don't. Anonymity is not something that I'm really aware of or have experienced. I don't think I am a diva, but there's little things once in a while that I, will catch myself on because of ways that I'd, traveled or lived. And I'm pretty, I'd be good in a teepee. I'm pretty good.
In terms of where you project yourself, in, I don't know, in another decade from now, I'm just wondering if any of I know you're still involved in so very much, but what happens to ambition and drive? I mean, does that get eroded a little bit once you've already hit such stratospheric heights? Or does it perhaps even make you, hunger for more?
I think it's actually a bit of both. I think it makes you wiser about what you choose. And as I like to say, like cool as a cucumber about, what opportunities come and what you take on. Because, I'm pretty, there would have been moments when I would have put so much emphasis on, working with a company or a house, and I'm more confident and at ease at what I can bring to that. I'm sure once something is actual, then it would go into like a little bit of the nerves that come, and then it transitions into like ambition and go time. But because I've had perspective and seen so many waves, I kind of can be more zen about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that changes ambition or emotion.
What have you told yourself in your darkest hours, because you've had a few of them, to really keep pushing through, to keep on going, to keep the dream alive?
I think that I owed it to, there's a few things. I think that I owed it to my own creativity. And I definitely always felt a responsibility in what I represented to new creators. And I knew that, I represented a creative dream. And that was something that I held with a lot of responsibility always, that the show must go on, that you wake up the next morning, it's a new day, wash your face, let's go. I in my darkest times, I never had a like quit moment, I've also generally stayed pretty healthy. So that, component of it never came into play. But I think, I wasn't in control of the machine. So it was just about always getting ready for the next collection. I don't, there's always something, the next thing always inspires the next thing. And I always think when I would be in some form of what you could call, creative stuck, which was not really something that happened. It was about getting, just getting the material out there and getting your hands dirty. And the next thing would lead to it. And then it, just kept going. But definitely taking time for oneself, going to nature, going into the water. Water is so important to me.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're a swimmer.
Yeah, I'm a swimmer. I love to swim.
You're good. I just have a hot tub, so I get in the water a lot too, but I haven't done much swimming lately. Okay, just to cap it off, because God, I could talk to you forever, Zac. I think your insights are so wonderful, and again, you're so grounded and you're so humble, and then I know you kind of came from a place of privilege, and that you started in this business with a lot of connections or people wanting to help you or be there for you, but boy, you wrote it out on your own at the end of the day. I mean, at the end of the day, it is.
Listen, you have everything, often the hits are even stronger. And, I think I always say that I was born and raised in New York City. I don't think of my parents as like ritzy New Yorkers, right? They're downtown New Yorkers. They're both working parents. But obviously when you pull away to, a lot of people and, the rest of the world, of course, it was immense cultural privilege. And, the greatest privilege was having such caring and supportive parents. And that's what I value.
What is great style to you then? When you've seen it all, you've seen, on a very superficial banal level too,
Yeah.
but truly.
Great style is expression, and great style is generosity of spirit. And dressing is a dialogue for oneself and for the world. And so, people that take that joy is sharing.
Zac, I love you to bits. Thank you so much for all your wisdom and creativity and light. You're an amazing guy.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on this episode of Beyond Style Matters. Lots of love.
Bye.